In this video, I will show you how I made this animation in Blend, from modeling, texturing, line art, animation, and compositing. Before I start modeling, I like to break down the scene and identify the different objects. This makes the process easier so I don't get lost or waste time figuring out what is missing. In Blender, I imported my reference image and adjusted the opacity. Then I started by adding basic shapes and tried to match their position and size to the reference. For the mountains, I used a subdivided plane. In sculpt mode, I masked an area that resembled the mountain in the reference. I used the gizmo to pull it up and refine the shape with the clay strips brush. I repeated the same process for the ground. To model the clouds, I used metabolts. I duplicated and scaled them to match the silhouette of the larger cloud. Then I turned them into a mesh, and I used the remesh modifier. To add more detail to the cloud, I used the subd and displacement modifiers. I duplicated the first one and adjusted the rotation and scale to make the rest of the clouds. Once I have most of the objects in the scene, I start to add the details. To make the dent, I used the knife tool and deleted the extra faces. Inside the cylinder, I used the F shortcut to make the new faces. I also added boundary loops and used crease edges to support the dent shape. To make the branch, first I added a loop and beveled it. Then I selected 4 faces and used the circle tool from the loop tool add-on. Next, I used the Inset Faces tool to create a support loop, extruded along the normals, and added another support loop at the end of the branch. Before subdividing the space capsule, I added boundary loops to keep the form. To make the windows, I selected some faces and used the Inset Faces tool. Then I used the circle tool from the loop add-on. To keep the curvature on the windows, I duplicated the capsule, then used the shrink wrap modifier and selected the copy as a target. For this project, I used 3 different kinds of textures: procedural textures, cell shading, and hand-painted textures. The cell shading was created using a simple node setup. I used a diffuse BSDF node, a shader to RGB node, and a color ramp node set to constant. To add more detail and extra lines to the mountains, I incorporated a Fresnel node, a map range node, and another color ramp node. Here you can see the comparison with and without the Fresnel node. For the ground, I used a procedural texture. I blended the first 2 colors with a mix node and connected a noise texture and a color ramp node to the factor input of the mix node. To add the third color, I duplicated the noise texture and the color ramp nodes, adjusted the settings, and used another mix node to combine it with the first 2 colors. I created a hand-painted mask for the 4th color and combined it with the existing colors using another mix node. For the hand-painted textures, I use the free Yuku Paint add-on, which allows for a layer-based painting similar to Substance Painter. In this clip, I will demonstrate the basics. Before starting to paint, I like to turn on the wireframe to see clearly my object's shape. You can find the Yuku Paint tab on the side menu. Next, click on Quick Yuku Paint Node Setup. For this project, I'm only using the color channel. Choose your base color to get started. Now you can add layers with mask to paint on. Here's a time-lapse of how I painted the space capsule. For the line art, I used the grease pencil as object line art. And in the line art modifier, selected the object I wanted to apply it. I used a simple outline for the cylinders with just the line art modifier. I used the subdivide, noise, thickness, and dot dash modifiers to add more detail to objects like the ground, grass, or greenhouse. To add the details to the cylinders, I use the draw modes. For the grass animation, I used the wiggle bone technique. It consists of adding an armature and in edit mode, extruding the necessary bolts. Then switch to bone mode and select the last bone and the nearby bone. Then press Ctrl plus Shift plus C. Choose down track and repeat the step for all the other bones, just leaving the first bone. Reduce the influence to 0.5 for all the constraints. To give it movement, I added a keyframe and a noise modifier. scatter the grass over the ground, I use particle systems and wave paint. I use particle systems to animate the grass blowing in the wind and the birds flocking. I learned the techniques from this video, which I will leave a link to in the description. To animate the bird, I used shape keys. I created a shape key for the wings at the top and another one for the wings at the bottom. To make the wings flappy, I added a keyframe every 20 frames, with increments of 0.25 at the value of the key shape. To make it loop, I selected all the keyframes, pressed Shift-E and selected Make Cyclic. To add variety to the flap of the birds, I offsetted the keyframes. I used the input node image sequence to import the three render layers: diffuse, outline, and CPath. Then I used a mix node to blend the diffuse and the outline, and the blur node to soften the line art. Finally, I applied the Z-Pass and a defocus node to add depth of field. And that's it. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one. Bye.